Good evening, everyone. I am just really thrilled that you decided to spend this Tuesday evening with us in this very special Tuesday evening. Today is the 51st anniversary of the United States Supreme Court decision of Griggs versus Duke Power. And to be able to do it again on that date makes it even more special. And I think I'm more nervous the second time around than the first time, because now I think I know much more about the impact of this case, and also that it's not being told and that we're missing something. And I'm to the point, I just don't want to miss anything. So thank you for being here. If you notice, it says Matthew. I'm not Matthew. I'm Valencia. I'm Valencia Abbott, and I'm going to introduce myself in a little bit. But I want to give way to my co-host this evening to also greet you before we do our introductions. So Elaine, can you unmute?
Hi.
Hi.
How are you?
I am well. I just wanted you to just give a greeting before we went into our introductions for the evening.
Good evening, everyone. And I am so excited to be here. And I'm very, very honored to have been asked to participate in this segment to honor those people that we now consider and know are heroes.
All right. So we're gonna also honor your time. Okay, start on time to finish on time. That's the teacher in me with that. So I am going to share screen now. As I told you before, I'm not Matthew. So let me give an explanation before I start. First, greetings from the Museum and Archives of Rockingham County. Matthew Thatcher is the executive director, but he is on annual leave. He is from the UK, and he hadn't seen his family in I think about 3 years, and they happen to be here. For those that don't know, the MARC, as the short name that we call, is a very small in staffing, not small in size. At one point, there were only 3 paid staff members, and I think at this point there's only 1, and that's Matthew. So the museum is truly a labor of love and volunteers. And I have been volunteering with the MARC for almost a decade now with that. So again, my name is Valencia. So I'm going to share my screen. And the thing is that when I tried it before and when I did slideshow, I couldn't see the participants, and that was a little off-putting. So when I share my screen, it's not going to be whole screen. One, I'm not used to actually facilitating, so we're just going to have to make it work for me. And here. Okay. So I don't know. Let's see if this will work. All right. So my problem is that I can see my screen, I can't see you. Sometimes doing this, I may do stop share. I hope that that's not really distracting for anybody, but I think that's what is going to get me through this with this. So to formally introduce myself, all right. As I said, I am volunteered at the MARC for almost 10 years. And you can see it if you hit the waffle icon. Thank you, Michelle. Now, where's the waffle icon?
It's under more.
It's under more. Okay.
Right. Okay. And then you have to, can you see it?
I'm under more. And all I see is live on Facebook, live on Workplace, and live on YouTube.
Okay. Do you see in the upper right-hand corner, there's a view, and then there's a little waffle icon?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. So I can go to
yes, any way you want. You can view us.
So I can go to speaker. Oh.
Mm-hmm.
Michelle, thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
Okay. All right.
No, it's her.
Okay. All right. Appreciate that. And actually let that set the tone. I truly do not mind interruptions. I'd rather have a conversation. I really don't like lectures with that. So anytime that you want to jump in, correct me, add to it, please feel free to do this. I really want this to be a conversation. So like I said, I've been a volunteer with the museum for almost 10 years. I'm on the program committee, and my high school history teacher contacted me and said, I want you to be on the program committee for the MARC. And I said, yes, ma'am. And that was it. The programs that I've created or facilitated over the 10 years have been always centered in Black history. That's my passion. I'm born and raised in Rockingham County. I went to Catawba College right after high school, and then 18 years later went back to get my master's. And I've been teaching for 17 I've been 17 years in education, and the last 9 at the early college. I am the mother of 3 daughters, 1 son-in-law, 4 beautiful grandchildren. So if you follow me on Facebook, you know, because that's what mostly you see, and 2 fur babies. I am so passionate about this, and my connection with Griggs came out of a program meeting. We were sitting there over 3 years ago, trying to come up with programs. And at that time, I realized that was in 2018. I was like, oh my goodness, it's going to be 50 years for the Griggs decision. And my goal then was that this 50th was not going to go by without some type of acknowledgement. In my wildest dream, I never envisioned that it would get to this point, that we have a permanent exhibit at the MARC, that I'm still continuing to work on this because it is still speaking to me. It's still things left undone to get this story out. And I have interacted and met some wonderful people that's also continuing to do this and work with me to get these stories out. And one of these people that I have met has been Elaine Jones. And we connected because of Facebook and a post. And then from there, back and forth, and then finally just conversations that got us to this point this evening with this program. So I'm going to give way and let Elaine introduce herself.
Okay, I am retired educator, and I try to stay very active. I started doing more things after retirement than I did before. I have 4 daughters. I number them. It's easier to call them by number sometimes. I have 5 grandchildren and 7, 8, I can't remember, 7, I think it is, great grands. And I am enjoying life at this point. I just celebrated my 83rd birthday, and I'm finding so much to do. I'm planning to be here at least through 100. I graduated from Drexel Institute. I did my, I studied for my master's at Temple University. And in my past life, I was a fashion designer as well, and a business owner. I've owned a daycare and a factory, and all in the process of raising those children. And now I didn't actually write a book until I retired. And I see Michelle is on here. Michelle was my editor for my book. I'm glad to see her. Okay, I did 2 books. That's all I have in me at this point because I'm doing so much because of that. I think that my first book was Price Road, and it's written about Rockingham County. A town called Leakesville is now called Eden. And my grandparents lived on that road. It's a fictional, Price Road is a fictional book, but it's actually fictionalized truth. I wrote true events in a fictionalized way so that I couldn't get sued because I was actually talking about real people and real things, but I gave them names. And when you read the book, you'll see that the names that I put a lot of thought into it since I could give them the name I wanted to. And I did things with the names that actually are part of the reading. For instance, one of the characters is Mr. and Mrs. Keys, who were educators. And to me, education is the key to all. And so they were that type of people. And so you'll begin to read, as you read the book, discover what the names have meanings, actually. And then I actually wrote, the second book is Aunt Dauncey's Trunk. You see, when I left North Carolina at about 3 or 4 years old, every year I came back to actually visit my parents and my grandparents who lived on Price Road, and Aunt Dauncey was our caretaker. She was my aunt, my mother's sister. And that book is about my memories there. So I'm anxious to share a lot of this with you all today.
All right. And I'm going to tell this when Elaine, and I want to call her Miss Elaine, but we came as friends, so I'm going to continue to say Elaine. When we were messaging back and forth her on Facebook, it came up that I think in January, is that correct, Elaine, your birthday?
Yes.
And it came up that she was 83, and I thought that was a mistake. And I at that point we had exchanged phone numbers. So I messaged her. I was like, Facebook is saying that you're 83 years old. And I was like, I didn't believe it. And then she was like, yeah, that's true. So I don't know if you were shocked. I was totally shocked, just blown away. That she was. And I felt bad because I was like, oh, I'm supposed to be saying Miss Elaine, but now it's just Elaine because we are. Yeah, I hope my mom in heaven just is not like looking down and saying, you know, you're not supposed to be calling grown folks by their first name. So
it's fine. It's actually fine.
Okay, great. Yeah, with that. But I was truly shocked. So how all of this came about with that, like I said, this is the 51st anniversary of the United States Supreme Court case of Griggs versus the Power Company. And for those that are not familiar with the case, I'm just going to give a short history. And I also want to say Dr. Cynthia Tompkins is also on this presentation, and she was the featured speaker last year. She is a law professor at Liberty University. So if you have like the legal questions or those big words for the legal thing that I probably can't answer, if you put it in the chat, or if you just unmute and ask as she said that she will be more than happy to address those with that. So Griggs versus Duke Power case. It starts in 1966. You have 14 African-American men that will sign a note to their supervisor requesting requesting the chance to apply for jobs out of the Labor Department. They're not even requesting anything spectacular. They just want a shot. And I think that's one of the things that just gets to me. They just want a shot. 1966. And the reason that I center this story in the civil rights movement is because most people assume that the civil rights movement ended in with the assassination of Martin Luther King. And to think that these men signed this note 2 years before King's assassination shows what heroic things that they went through. It's just phenomenal to me that they would do that. So they do this. They are also connected with the Reedsville branch of the NAACP, and then president at that time was James Arthur Griggs. With his assistance and with the backing of the NAACP, this is going to make its way through the court system, and it takes until 1971 until a unanimous decision is made in favor of the plaintiffs. And by the time the case goes to the Supreme Court, there's only 13 plaintiffs because Jesse Martin receives a promotion, so he doesn't become part of the suit. But I include him in the research because he was one of the ones that originally signed the note. Now, for tonight, we are going to talk about the case, but this has a different focus and a different vibe from last year. Last year, we was digging deep into the legal aspect, and that is truly important with that, trying to decipher all of this out. But this year's focus is on these 14 men, the culture, the history, and place of this. Because when you're doing the research, these men are grouped together. They are not named many times in the books. The plaintiffs. We don't know a lot about them individually, and that's what drew me to continue to do this research and to continue to dig into the story. So I want to start. Well, I'm gonna stop right there. One of the things I want to just make a note on. Part of working on this research with Griggs is that I had the opportunity I received a grant from National Geographic Society. And part of that grant is that I was able to do two things. One, I was able to have a summer internship with college and high school students. And then the other one is a teacher fellowship, which is in the process now. And Dr. Brooksy Sturban, who's leading that with me, is also on the Zoom now. But I wanted to just stop to say that several of my summer interns, they're making me happy. As I'm admitting them in, they're making me so happy. But I also want to let you know that they're also a resource because they spent last summer tracking down family, friends, and they may know more. So if you have questions that I may not answer, you have like a whole group of people that is invested in this. because I'm telling you right now, I don't know all of the answers. I have a lot more questions than I have answers, but we have this circle of people that's going to continue to get the story out. So there are also, I saw several of them pop in that's on here. So if you have questions, guys, if it's a question and you know I don't know the answer, please chime in and help me out and share that. So let's start with the place. I know that everybody here is not from Rockingham County. And this place is central to the story or telling of the story of these men. Because when they do this, Rockingham is definitely a rural place. According to the 2020 census, our population is at 91,000, 91,096. All right. We are considered the North Star. We are close to the Greensboro High Point area, not far from the Virginia state line. Rockingham County geographically is one of the largest counties. There's 100 counties in North Carolina, and Rockingham County geographically is one of the largest counties for the state of North Carolina. And part of the story with this is that Rockingham is rural. Okay, it's not big city. Okay, so these men that's going to do this is us, is just plain folks. They're just getting up every day, going to work, trying to survive this. And I think that makes it unique, because usually when people think of the civil rights movement, they think of Martin Luther King and the Greensboro Four, and they don't see this rural, just countryside in regards to how people was fighting for civil rights, how they were fighting for the advantages that me enjoy today, right? And to know that these people walk the same space in the same places that I did make the story almost always relevant to me. So this was just some scenes around Rockingham County. And one of the reasons that I have lots, when I was looking at this, reviewing this, I was like, oh, I have a lot of cemeteries and churches. And that's because I spent probably the last 3 years in a lot of cemeteries and churches, because this is where I found the plaintiffs. This is where I found most of them. And that's the sad part, that, and I haven't found all of them. They're resting places, which I'm going to continue. Yeah, this is their memorial. And really, should that be the memorial, is their burial site. But Rockingham County is really rural. And when we get to the part with Elaine's story, that is the part that makes it special. Is because truly, we're nothing but just like country folks with this. To Elaine's part and why we got here. So with my conversations with Elaine that she brought up, which I really wasn't aware, my preference is 19th century Black history. So doing 20th century research and study has definitely taken me out of my comfort zone, but it's one that I'm willing to go into for this story. So with my conversations with Elaine and with her research that she's doing, she shared about this silent generation. These people born between 1928 and 1945. And to find out that most of these plaintiffs, some of them are born like 1921, but a big group of these plaintiffs are born during the silent generation. And their coming of age is during this time. And that is going to make an impact on why they're going to do what they do, right? So that last paragraph that I put on there, this part that starts, it includes most of those who fought during the Korean War upon coming of age in the 1950s. They are noted as forming the leadership of the civil rights movement, right? One of the things that I've come to find out that 8 of the 14 are actually veterans of World War II. And again, that is part of the story. So I'm gonna let Elaine speak to the part about African Americans in the silent generation.
Okay, the silent generation name came from for I think Fortune magazine, and he coined that phrase and sort of took on because it was before technology, and there wasn't a lot of ways to stay in touch with people, and we didn't know a lot that they did. They didn't speak on it. It was a time period that was for children to be seen and not heard. You don't get in on adult conversations. So there were a lot of things that went on that children were not aware of in their own families, such as in this case, even people in their own family didn't know that these men were going through what they were going through or doing what they were doing. The silent generation is they have fewer children. They're really a crisis. They're caught between crises, between wars and the Depression. And it just is really difficult. And for Black people, if a nation has a cold, you've heard the saying, Black people got pneumonia. So we had a different reaction to everything than the white people population did. You can imagine it wasn't that far removed from the actual Emancipation Proclamation. It's really an era that we could have a lot to discover. There were people in there that broke through that silence, and we know of them. Martin Luther King, Sammy Davis, we really have heard of them, but we don't know the average person, that our neighbors, people in our family. And that's why they call it the silent generation. It really is silent.
Thank you. All right. So as Elaine and I was thinking about how we wanted to present this and the things that we wanted to share, we have to remember the time that these men are coming of age. Like I said, 8 of them are World War II veterans. By the time that they're working at Duke Power in the case in 1966, most of them are what we would consider middle age. And when I first started on this project, and people would tell me they were old men when this was done. And to find out that we're talking about people that were men that were in their 50s and 60s. And since I will be celebrating my 58th birthday on Sunday. I don't consider them old people, but anyway, they were that age. So they're in their 50s and 60s when the case comes about. But this is also the era of Jim Crow. And remember, they've lived their entire life in the Jim Crow era. Everything that they've ever done will shape this. And again, when you think about that is their story, and they still sign their name to that paper and to continue to do that, amazes me every time I say it and read it and research it. So as Elaine and I was talking, there are so many things that we wanted to talk about that we're not going to have time to talk about. And my presentation, I put the link to the presentation in the chat, and I will put it in there again because I'm a teacher, which means that I share my information. It is not for me to hoard because I want everybody to learn and learn at your own pace or take what you need. So I provided links for these topics. Again, not all of those that we're going to go into, but if we really want to understand this case, these men and these five and their lives, we have to understand the world that they lived in and it existed for them. And it shaped everything that they touched from their education, okay? Only 3 of the 14 will have a high school diploma, and Willie Boyd gets a GED, but that's later in life. I think the least amount of education is someone with one of them with a 3rd grade education. So from 3rd grade up to a high school diploma. Again, but those opportunities of education is shaped because of the Jim Crow era, shaped because they are in Rockingham County, shaped because of the limited availability. Maybe that's why we have 8 of those that are going to join the military with that. So again, I have more questions than I do answers.
Well, the education level, I'd like to speak on that for a minute. The education in the South, education we're living in like you said, the Jim Crow area. And it's not a lot of schools available for Black people to go to. So, and especially in rural areas, when they didn't have cars, a lot of this was before they actually had cars or many cars in the area. So if you went past high school, if you got to high school, you had to usually go someplace else to attend. My own mother lived in rural Leakesville, and she had to go to Reedsville, which was a bigger town, to go to high school because there was no Black school available. And which is very interesting because her grandfather, my mother's grandfather, Robert Gwen, actually was the inspiration for a one-room schoolhouse that was developed, and his own children and grandchildren were not able, after elementary school, to go to high school and so forth, unless they left home. So she had to go and live with a relative or a friend in Reedsville. And this is high school was not, it wasn't well done. It wasn't, people did not necessarily attend high school, didn't have anything to do with their level of intelligence. Okay, but didn't have a high school diploma. But then white people didn't either. We must not forget that. They were not attending high school so much either. So the education was not available. I was the first in our whole family to get a college diploma. And that's many years later. My book that I wrote of Aunt Dauncey's Trunk, I started out with Clarence, talking about Clarence at his funeral. Clarence Purcell was one of these 13 men. And as a family, we did not know about this, what had happened. But Clarence did not have a high school diploma. So when he put his name on that letter, as you stated, that was really an important thing because he was very intelligent. And I started out by talking about how even at his funeral, which was years after this incident, this decision, and he got the job and moved up in the company, and the white folks came to his funeral and even cried, I said, because I didn't know he had gone through so much, but I was observing. And he had reached the point that he was able to have a really important job at the company after all this went down. But the education was not available in most cases for them to get.
Yes. Thank you. I also want to say the names of the plaintiffs. Elaine's already mentioned Clarence Purcell because she's related to them, right? And I've already told you why I say 14 plaintiffs. Their names was Louis Harrison Jr., James Tucker, Willie Boyd, Willie Griggs, Junior Blackstock, Robert Jumper, Clarence Jackson, Herman Martin, Eddie Broadnax, Eddie Galloway, William Purcell, Clarence Purcell, and Jesse Martin. The thing with that is that most of students that I've taught in Rockingham County, I've probably come across people with these last names many times in the years that I've taught. How many of them may be related to these men and not even know it? Whether a close relative or distant relative. One of the some of the stories that I found out is finding out children and grandchildren finding out about this case in college classes, not aware that their own father or grandfather was part of this. And that's part of that legacy that Elaine is talking about, that this generation did not talk, did not share these stories. But so how do we come about finding these stories? How do we get this information? And especially with something that's this important, okay? And finding the documentation. This is a copy of the actual letter that was typed and put onto the desk of the supervisor. And on the other side is a timeline of March of 1966. And the reason that I did this is to show you, or to show us, or to show me the importance of what was going on. So for these men in Rockingham County in March of 1966, this piece of paper on their supervisor's desk is a historical moment. It is not one that we usually see captured anywhere else, okay? But for them, because at this moment, they don't know, one, if they're gonna see the next day. Does this mean that they could actually die? Remember, this is 2 years before King assassination. Does it mean that they may not have that job? Is this gonna be their last day? Will their families be harassed? What does this mean? This is such a historical moment. But again, one that many people don't know, even to today, that this happened. And understanding why they chose not to talk about it. And I think with the first program and with the little that I did know, or my interpretation of the history, my assumption, and before connecting with Elaine, my assumption was they didn't tell because of the consequences of their actions. Not thinking that it was a whole cultural thing that was going on. That never entered my mind until I started reading and interacting with Elaine's research. So there's probably a lot more stories out here that we don't know. Especially if we're talking about the silent generation, and we're talking about the silent generation in regards to African-American culture with that. So, as I said, the case ends on March 8th, 1971. We know how it ends. This is how it started. This is how it ends. If you go to the PowerPoint, I've linked this to the audio, so you can actually hear the oral arguments for the case. So a unanimous decision on March 8th, 1971. But like I said, again, there's also other stories with the silent generation, some connected directly to these plaintiffs and others that will give us an idea of what it was like for them growing up. And so Elaine is going to take a couple of minutes and share some of her stories.
Okay, you see some pictures here, and I was actually born in Reidsville. And the picture at the top here is of my 4th birthday party. I was born in January, as you probably have heard by now, but I don't think January is a good time for parties. You never know what the weather is going to bring. So my mother was very, very astute in that area. She gave me this party in North Carolina in June. It's better weather. So all the little kids there are the kids who actually lived on Ridge Street where I was born, and I'm in front of the house that I was born in. But I didn't live there any longer. We lived in Philadelphia, but we came back every summer. On the side of the screen, on the left side, is my grandfather at an older age, and my grandfather, the younger picture of him when he was younger. So that's both of those pictures of my grandfather. And Clarence Purcell, we talked about, Clarence was one of the 13 plaintiffs. And this is his mother-in-law, who is my aunt. He was married to my oldest cousin, Dolores. Well, that's me standing in front of my aunt's flower garden on Price Road. And in the other picture, the 4 ladies are the last picture that was taken of all 4 sisters together. We were at a family reunion at the plant at DuPont, where Clarence went through all this with. And they allowed us to use that for a family reunion outing. And it's really interesting that, as you said, we discovered not too much is known, and it's called the silent generation, but I think they did it for a variety of reasons. Africa, they were taken out of Africa. Black folks were taken out of Africa, but they didn't take Africa out of them. And there was a way of communicating that Black folks had. And I discovered that it was universal. We told stories. I call them African truisms. They actually didn't have time to sit down and talk to us and give us a lot of instruction about what was going on and information. They told us short stories, tales, fables, or just made statements that it helped you to figure out things. I think that it's important to teach you how to think and how to figure out, rather than giving you the instruction per day. It's really a way of communicating, but we have to be paying attention. And it forces you to do that. And when I discovered that everybody in the Black community that I came across with, their families use the same techniques of instruction. It was telling us things like, I'll give you some examples you may know. Ever heard anybody say, where there's a will, there's a way? That's one. Sometimes you might hear them say, make sure you learn something new every day. I heard my parents say that all the time. Make sure you learn. And it's not what you know, it's who you know. Think it through. Never be a day late and a dollar short. Never be a day late or a dollar short. Are these things that you have heard? We all have them in our family. It's a whole bunch of them. Don't bite the hand that feeds you. The bigger they are, the harder they fall. You're getting life lessons passed down because they're working hard. They don't have time. Just think about the fact that there's no television. It's barely have a radio, and there are no special newspapers. Black folks. Black folks were relegated to the last pages, where they show the obituaries and who killed somebody, is usually what the news was. So you had to do things to stay close, to absorb, and to learn on your own, because mom and dad didn't have time. They were washing clothes in a big, I can remember a big black iron thing, full that tub in the yard. and fill it up with water. You had to draw from a well. The first family that I knew, we had a cousin that had inside plumbing and electricity, the first ones in the family on Price Road. And we were so excited. We would go over there just to see the lights get turned on. So it really is an era when there's nothing to do except work, and you create your own enjoyment. Men did not get, men and women did not have jobs, not that weren't capable of doing it, but they didn't have jobs that were any more than common labor. These men were working in the coal bins of the plant, shoveling coal. That's all that they could do. And they're asking to be able to move up into a better position, not labeled as a laborer, but to be able to do some of the other jobs. And this is why this all came about, because that's all they wanted. But that's what all over the Black people were regulated to. And if you think about it, I saw my father filling out a paper for some reason, I can't remember exactly what, and he wrote down his job as laborer. Well, I couldn't understand why he did that, because I knew that on his job, he worked for Singer American Meter Company, manufactured by the Singer Company that made the sewing machines. And he was pretty much the leader of his department. He was in the shipping department. When somebody came in, he had to train them. They were white people to be his boss. I knew that, and I'm wondering why he put laborer on there. But he explained to me, almost everybody he knew was a laborer. There were not that many jobs that people could do. They could work in a hospital, but they were scrubbing the floors. Or they could work in a manufacturing, the Lucky Strike Tobacco Company and Winston-Salem Tobacco Company. They hired people in the factories. And the factories were about the only other thing they could do. At New Shine, there was, I don't know if you heard about New Shine in Reedsville. Do you know about that, Valencia? My mother with a high school diploma could not do anything at work at New Shine. That was making.
I'm not familiar with that part.
That was the company that made shoe polish. They call it New Shine. So it really was not much that they could do except common laborer. When I asked my father once why men in the church were so important, they were dignified, they carried themselves, and I thought it was pretty uppity stuff that they were doing. And he told me because that was the only time in the church that they could be taken as real men, because outside of that, they were not treated as real men. They were treated like boys, just regulated to common everyday work, hard work, but not able to move up in it. The picture you're seeing now is in the top corner is Clarence. That was my cousin through marriage, and his brother. They both were on this this case.
And I just want to interject really quick. I wasn't able to get an image of the Purcells until Elaine, and I still don't have pictures of all of the men. So I am just eternally grateful for her, because I want them to be identified more than just a name. They are real people, and we need to see who they were, and we need to see them looking back at us. So I just want to just put that out there that she shared these images of them. So Elaine, will you do a quick reading of one of your books?
Okay, I'm going to read from Aunt Dancy's trunk.
Okay.
One of the things that you must be aware of is that because of work, most people were sharecroppers or working on a farm. And we were so proud of Clarence because he was one of the first people in the area to get a job outside of being a sharecropper. So just being off the farm, we were so proud of him. And I start out on Dancy's Trunk by talking about him, as I said before. But one of the things that we did work toward getting people, we were part of the Great Migration. My family was part of the Great Migration. That's how we got to Philadelphia, because men were looking for jobs, and they would leave home because they didn't want to be a sharecropper, and leave home and had heard that there were jobs available in the North. So we got up here, and once we got here, like everybody else in the Black community, we were a passport to other people coming. There was some place to stay until they could get themselves together. So it was like a stepping stone into the next era. And I'm going to read because we got here, and my mother and aunt, we all lived together in the same household. And my aunt bought the house, and my mother and my father and my brother and I lived with my aunt and uncle and paid the rent, which helped pay the mortgage. And but everybody came through from Reedsville, and relatives and friends. Now I'm just going to read a section that I called in the chapter "Do Drop In." That's what we called our house, "Do Drop In." Right, some of our relatives on our home on Reed Street became a "Do Drop In" for friends and extended families who were trying to make their transition into the promising land. Over the years, we supplied room and board to an assortment of people. Uncle Robert's sister, Sadie, his cousin Neil, and her daughter, Ruth Lee, lived with us for several years. Eventually, they moved into an apartment next door. And they had Neil's 70-year-old mother, Sophia, came up then to live with them. Peggy, the daughter of Pigmeat and Lucille Lumford, my parents' friends from Ridge Street, stayed with us for a while she went to business school. Uncle Robert's mother, Mrs. Slade, stayed with us for 2 months every year. Mrs. Slade had 12 children. Therefore, she spent a month with each one of her children. And since her daughter Sadie lived with us, Miss Slade stayed in our house for 2 months every year, and then took time that took care of the entire year for her. Some of our relatives and friends were short-term visitors as they searched for jobs and housing. Everyone who came through our "Do Drop In" was ambitious and determined to work very hard at anything that they could find, willingness to do whatever was necessary to achieve God's blessings on this promising land. And our house provided refuge during that transition. Because of the constant influx of people, my mother suggested that the 3-bedroom row house needed more bedrooms. Then under her direction, the shed in the back of the kitchen was converted to a bedroom. A sofa was placed in a full-length basement, which became an all-purpose room with a big coal furnace, which was later converted to a burn oil, stood in the middle of the basement floor and served almost as a room divider. The laundry section of the basement consisted of wringer-style washing machine and a large double galvanized iron tubs. But this was now accomplished everything for people moving in. And it was really, we never know who was going to be the next guest, okay?
Yeah, I think part of the story with this, and thank you, Elaine, for that. I think part of the story with this is these men, they stayed, all right? And if you haven't read Isabel Wilkerson's The Warmth of Other Suns, I definitely encourage everybody to read that along with Elaine's book regarding the Great Migration, because you do have this generation that will be leaving. But these men, these plaintiffs, they stay. Okay. And that takes a different kind of courage. It took courage to leave and it took courage to stay. Okay. And they stayed. But you do have that connection, as you said, to people in Philadelphia and places. And most people know I got family, even though DC is technically in the South. You people say, I got people in DC and Detroit and California. You do have these people that are leaving these places for jobs. The fact that these men had jobs at Duke Power, which at that time is one of the highest paying jobs. And even as Black men, they were making $1.64 an hour. That was top pay for them. That wasn't top pay for the white workers, but it was top pay for the Black workers.
They made less than any of the Black white folks did. They made less and did harder work. It was really hard work. In fact, my cousin, Clarences Daughters, told me, because they were, when this happened, probably about 11 years old, 11 or 12. And they remember him coming home covered with soot from the cold. And they had facilities at the plant to be able to take a shower before they left to go home. And they didn't understand why he stopped doing that. Evidently, he was fearing for his life, for trouble that he would run into, to be caught in a shower. So he would come home with the dirt and the soot on him still and take a shower after he got home. They didn't understand what was happening. They actually said that they laughed at him and thought it was funny. Papa, why didn't you take a shower before you came home? But he never said anything or why. It was just now that they're understanding he might have been in trouble or didn't want to be available to get in trouble. So there are so many things to think through after we know the facts.
All right. Do you want to just quickly read the one about the Purcells in Rockingham County?
Okay.
All right.
Okay. This is the first chapter in this on Dancy's trunk. We have it at Clarences Funeral. We have it, everybody is sitting around for a repast at his house, the house that he built for his family after he got the promotion and so forth that they had worked so hard for. But I must tell you this, I discovered from my cousins, from his children, that when they first moved into this house, their mailbox was bombed at least 3 times. And he actually sat outside in his car with a shotgun because of the threats and all they were getting, and the house getting egged. And he called the police, and the police told him he couldn't sit out there with a gun, with his shotgun. But he told them, I'm protecting my own, and they can't keep bombing my mailbox, because they moved into an area which was predominantly white. So it's all sorts of things that were going on. All right, I'm going to read the memories I have from his funeral. And I must tell you that even though it appears that I know about this case, I did not. I only was observing. I'm a very good observer. And I observed and wrote what I saw, but not it. And when I read it myself, I said, it seems like I knew, but I didn't. And I thank you for pulling all this information up for us. Okay. In the corner of the living room, on one side of our conversational group, my father relaxed in Clarence's favorite brown leather recliner with his eyes closed. Therefore, we talked softly as our spontaneous conversation reverberated in and out of past in present existence, becoming a mental exercise in time travel. We were sharing memories of the good times spent together with Clarence, who was built like Jack Johnson, the fighter, except that he was better looking. Must have had some Mandingo blood in him, looks like he could have. Clarence was a tall, handsome Black man with broad shoulders. As he grew older, Clarence's full head of Black hair had become a beautiful salt and pepper, with no intentions of ever balding. He had a subtle sense of humor. I was never sure when he was telling me a fact or just pulling my leg without smiling. In fact, I said, I don't ever remember seeing him smile with his face. He always smiled with his eyes. Clarence could always talk his way out of a fight. He was a good negotiator. Good thing too, because he never hit anybody. If he ever did, they would be hurt real bad. I remember when I first saw Clarence, I thought he was the biggest man I'd ever seen. Of course, that was only when I was about 12 years old. He was the only one I knew who could have gone through what he did on that job. It's always hard to be the first one anywhere. Clarence's shoulders were never slumped, even when he was tired. He always stood erect and tall, like Frederick Douglass without a beard. We always thought of him as the Jackie Robinson of the Leakesville Energy Company. Listen to you all comparing him to all those great men. He was just being Clarence, wasn't trying to be nobody else, Dolores contributed. Well, that may be so, but he sure enough made those white folks respect him. Didn't even want him to retire when he did. Yes, sirree. Whole bunch of them even came to the funeral, even cried. They ended up treating Clarence like he was the president of the company. You wouldn't believe that he started out shoveling coal in the yard. There was a laughter of respect as we visualized that truth. Okay.
Elaine, just
Yeah.
thank you for that. And to reiterate, you did not know about the case when you wrote that, correct?
I only knew what I observed. And I had no idea. Without you, none of us would know. We knew he was going through something, but we were proud of him for being where he was, because there were so few jobs available for Black men. You were either a preacher, an entertainer, a gambler, a hustler, or you were on the farm. There was a work in the ice ice company, shopping ice. That's about it. We did have one man who was an insurance man. I'm trying to think of his name right now. I can't call it, but that was it.
Yeah, and like I said, when we connected and we found that we had this in common, that we had these narratives that went together. So one, I just want to thank you for taking the time to share your stories, your history, your narratives, because you made the story of Griggs more fuller, the Griggs versus Duke Power. You made that, because in sharing your stories in relation with Clarence Purcell, we know more about all of them. We know how they're connected, and we can understand and start to get more of these stories out, so that we can get more of than just Clarence Purcell. We can get more of these men's voices out. And part of that, when I first started with the Griggs case, which I wasn't really into genealogy. I mean, I've done a little bit, but the last 3 years have made me, because that's what it took. Because I had no idea who these men were. I did not realize until later on that I went to high school. I went to high school with Tyrone Griggs. I was not aware that Tyrone Griggs' father was Willie Griggs. And all I knew about Tyrone Griggs is that he was just so handsome. He was just a handsome, and he was nice. Not only that, I mean, he was handsome and he was just nice. And he was an upperclassman, which means basically he just totally ignored me, but he was handsome and nice. But imagine, his father was part of this Supreme Court case. I'm going to school with him, high school with him, and had no clue, not until 3 years ago, when I first started doing this research. So when we say silent generation, they are truly a silent generation. But it's going to take.
Clarence's brother was involved in this too. And It's amazing because nobody in the family knew about this. And it's two men, brothers, that were working together, and both names are on that list.
Yes, and nobody, but it's going to take all of us to get these stories out. And like I said, I wasn't into genealogy as much, but I've come to grow, to learn, to love and understand this. And in order to tell the Griggs story, it's a story in genealogy. And part of this is, one, I'm hoping that we get more people, especially those families and friends that actually knew these men, to come forward and to help us document this. Because if we don't tell the story is going to go away. No one's ever going to know. Like the scene that you read about Clarences funeral, and how you describe him, and how he's Frederick Douglass without the beard. I mean, those are images and connections that we're not going to get from an online search or reading the United States Supreme Court about the case. We get to really know these people. So it's going to take all of us. And I came across this, I think at the beginning of this year, of some of the things that all of us can do, whether we're connected to the Griggs case or not. It's important that we start documenting our history, our Black history. And I love this. I didn't get to do it this February, but you know, Black history is more than just in February. So I saved this. And one of my goals is that I am going to check everything off this list. All right. These are the things that I am going to personally document, because I want my stories told. Now, whether my family ever gets to the Supreme Court, probably not, but our stories matter. Okay. And if we don't collect those, then they're going to be lost. Now, we may never get to Elaine's level and write 2 books with our family, but telling our stories and sharing our stories are important, whether we make it in a book or not.
I have taught a teenage class at a library here in Philadelphia a couple of years ago, and I taught them how to talk to their parents and grandparents, to begin to record and keep that information started now. And there's so many questions I wished I had asked when I was younger. And I know that if you do it, you're going to really be proud of yourself to create. I just did most of this from memory. It took me 10 years to write on Donzi's trunk, because I was memorizing, I was remembering things, but I had to go back and check with the family and make sure I was remembering what the same thing that they were. But I wrote it because my children actually kept asking me questions. And I started out, it wasn't to actually publish a book. I started out just to write a record of things that I was remembering for my children. And before I got so old, I didn't remember the details. I started writing it down. And I read it to a few people who found it interesting and said, well, why don't you actually publish it? So that's why it's published. It didn't start out to be a published book. I started out so my children would know what I knew. I discovered I'm the oldest in the family now. Oh. And I discovered that's why I need to tell the story before I'm gone. That's why.
And some resources and strategies that I've come across, some of them I was familiar with, some of them I've come about because of Griggs. Go to the family reunions, okay? Show up, pay your money to whoever that cousin is that's collecting, and go to the family reunions and talk to people. All right, do that. All right. Old yearbooks. Okay. Those church bulletins, especially with homecoming, where they have those histories and they have all of those names. Because when we do Black genealogy, we have to think of other ways of getting that information. It's not going to be so readily available. All right. So those homecoming bulletins, especially obituaries, family Bibles, all of that is resources and documentation. And especially if you have those kind of documentations in relationship to those plaintiffs, maybe think about donating that to the museum. Imagine that you're the grandchild or the child of one of those plaintiffs, and that your family heirloom is going to be put into a museum. That is just I think an awesome thing to happen. And even if you don't want it to go out the family, you could donate it to the MARC for a specific amount of time so that you can share that information with other people. All right. But me personally, if my family was part of a Supreme Court case and I could put them in a museum, as a history teacher, that would be like one of the geekiest things ever. So these are some resources that you can do, whether you're doing with the Griggs case or whether you're doing your family genealogy. These are some of the sources that you should be checking on. All right. Also, we know that people of African descent in the United States is born out of slavery. That is not our whole story. So let me put that out there. Our story does not begin being enslaved. It does not start in chains. But the truth is that that history, that almost 300 years of enslavement is part of our story. And for many, getting past the 1870 census will be difficult. Okay, I'm in the process now of doing that. So some things that you may not be aware of, most counties in Rockingham County, most counties in the state of North Carolina has at the Register of Deed a slave deed index. Not all counties, but most of them that you could start there. There's the slave schedule at the National Archives. There's the slave narratives from the Federal Writers Project. All of those, it's going to take some time. Sometimes it takes actually to visit those places to get everything is not online, but a lot of it is. I've been able to find a lot, especially with the Griggs case online. Really thankful for the summer interns because they're the ones who had to go out and do the work and the digging because I didn't have the availability to do that. So my research with the Griggs was, what could I get online? They went out and did the sweaty and the working part of that. Definitely Ancestry. Ancestry, you have to pay for it. But I found out for me, it was worth it because I can get the information more quickly. Okay, so you can get the information that's on Ancestry, but it's going to take a lot more work. And since I did not necessarily have that time to do that, I got the subscription to Ancestry, and that helped me with the search, especially when I was looking for the men and I didn't have a picture. I didn't know who they were. I had no idea. So going on there and finding their World War II cards, their draft cards, looking up census information, trying to track them down would help me put me on the track to try to find families. I still haven't been able to find all members of all of the families, haven't been able to make contact, but a few of them. And the ones that are here on this call, thank you. I did see you come in the room. Kudos. y'all know who I'm talking about. So y'all have definitely been representing your family, and I so appreciate that. And they continue to do that, and I'm just thankful because they've made this a lot easier. Some other things for resources when looking for Black genealogy that you may not have considered: Jet magazine. Was your great grandma one of those Jet beauties back in the day? Hey, you never know. All right. Ebony magazine. And with the Griggs case, one of the things that I found out was the Crisis magazine, which I was surprised out, especially because it's connected to the NAACP. I was able to go online and pull out images, not only related to the Griggs case, but local history. When they're giving out awards and they would have the names of these people there. So that is definitely a great resource if you're doing genealogy. One of the things that I haven't been able to access as much as I want to is Black newspapers. And I saw this, I think last week, with Howard University is going to digitize a lot of Black newspapers. So I'm just waiting for that to drop. That is going to be really great. Elizabeth mentioned that Ancestry is free through Rockingham Community College, and that is correct. You can go through the community college and get it, but through the community college, you only get so much. You don't have full access like you do with the subscription. That's what I found out. But again, for those that need to do it that way, it is a great resource with that. So Black newspapers are a way. Elaine mentioned obituaries being in the back of the newspapers, and that's correct if those were white newspapers. But Black newspapers would have news about Black culture, Black history, and Black people front and center. Okay, so those are also a source that you could use. And I provided a link to the list of African American newspapers in North Carolina. I was not aware that was that many until I started doing the research. So that is definitely a resource. And then the other one is go visit these places. Okay, Elaine talked about coming from Philadelphia to Reesville and going to the places that she spent over the summer and that she visited and going that. Go home, go to where your grandmother or your great grandmother grew up with. We know that the places have changed, but go step on those same spaces on that land that they've been to. Make that connection, be in that space, right? And as you are traveling, think about these places that you can get information that may not have automatically come off the top of your head. At the International Civil Rights Museum, imagine going through an exhibit and you see a picture or you see a connection. Oh yeah, that was what my grandfather did. The Charlotte Hawkins Brown Museum, which is only about 20 minutes. How many people have actually went there? It's a marvelous exhibit, and it's all about education, which Elaine talked about at the beginning. They have a wonderful online exhibit, but that truly doesn't do it justice there. Historic Stagville, which most people don't know. Those enslavers at one time had over 900 people enslaved on their property. Over 900 people. And you know that of those 900 people, some of those people have made their way to Rockingham County. So go visit Historic Stagville. I have been several times, and every time that I go, I learn something new. And then, of course, the Museum and Archives of Rockingham County. It is not Black centered, it is local history. But there, most people don't know about the 100 Negroes that comes out of Antigua. And these are 100 people that are enslaved together and they stay together, which is so unique. But the thing about that is that there are names associated with them, okay? So when we're looking for history, Elaine also said that, you know, when we talk about the silent generation, they're one generation from that Emancipation Proclamation, or 2 generations from the Emancipation Proclamation. And they have a reason to be silent, okay? But we don't want them to be silent anymore. So even if they're not here with us, we want their stories captured. So as we get ready to close, I want to give my takeaway, and I want to leave the last word with Elaine. My takeaway, what I wanted from this program, why I devoted all of this time and this energy, is I want this Griggs case to matter. I want the names of these plaintiffs to be known. That when we talk about the civil rights movement, that we think of Griggs versus Duke Power. That we know the names of Clarence Purcell and Robert Jumper and Willie Griggs, and that we know them, that we know that they was important, we know that their sacrifice. I want to get in touch with these families and friends of these men to help us document this story. And until I get to the point that I'm satisfied that I've done what I'm supposed to do, I'm going to keep continuing to do this. All right, Elaine.
Okay, I'm really honored that you have invited me to participate, and I want to give honor to you for doing this, because without your research, we wouldn't have known all this. But we do have, I want to invite people to go to YouTube. I have a YouTube video called The Silent Generation, Our Stories, Our Truth. That's the whole thing. Because there's a lot of information about the silent generation in general. But this is particularly our stories, our truth. And talk to the people in your family, in your neighborhood, people that get to them before they're gone. Get the stories, record them. Everybody has in their hands now a video camera. You can record things immediately. We didn't have that. I remember trying to get conversation going with people at years ago before I couldn't write fast enough. So it really is important, I think, that you actually do talk to people as soon as possible and keep a record of what they're saying and deeper research, like you said. Thank you so much for what you do.
Oh, no, thank you for sharing the story. So we only have a couple of minutes, but I wanted, someone has their hand up, and I know I'm supposed to know how to do this after being on Zoom for like forever. But whoever has their hand up, you can just unmute and just talk, because I can't find it.
Okay. Hi, good evening.
Right.
This is Cynthia Thomas. How are you this evening?
I'm good. How are you, Cynthia?
I'm doing well. And I just wanted to tell you how much, and to say to Mrs. Jones, how much I've enjoyed hearing from both of you this evening. Your presentations were outstanding. And as always, Valencia, and this is the first time I've heard from Mrs. Jones, but you both are excellent. And thank you for sharing the information. I see that Brenda Matthews is also here this evening. And Brenda, you know that I need to be in touch with you. I am progressing, and I will be in touch with you shortly. I wanted to say to Ms. Jones also, as I was listening to you, I'm sure you know my family probably. Ridge Street, I spent quite a bit of time on that street as a kid occasionally. But you were long gone, I'm sure, when the time I was coming around there. I'm sure you know the McCains. I assume you're related to Mrs. Inez Jones and Portia and Linda and Joey and Rudy and all of those.
No, my name was Johnson.
Yours is Johnson. For some reason,
the Slades, did you know the Slades on Ridge Street? There was a Slades, and Lumford.
The Lumfords I know well. What was his name?
Peggy.
Peggy. What's Peggy's brother's name? Junior. He
Junior.
was he and my father were like best friends. Did you know William Tompkins?
I'm trying to think. I think
Bill Tompkins. They lived on Church Street. They lived on Church Street. Yeah.
Okay.
And so anyway, well, let's chat afterwards so we don't take everyone's time. But I wanted to connect with you and just tell you how impressed I am with everything you're doing on this. And I don't want to take up the time because we're dealing with Valencia is a premier schools teacher, and she's gonna cut us off if we don't practice.
And Cynthia, what I'll do is I will send you Elaine's information.
Yes, but I enjoyed it so much this evening. It was just always Valencia is just fantastic. What you're continuing to do with this project and you just do in general, you're just wonderful with this. And I just want to say thank you. And to the MARC as well, regarding some of the MARC pictures that you've posted online, I had not seen those to this evening from the Nunnally collection of the photography. I recognize most of not most, but quite a bit. The school children at the schoolhouse, that's my mother and cousins on there. That's from the Jones Chapel. It's out at near the Jones Chapel Church. It used to be a schoolhouse there. I'll ask my aunt exactly what the name of the school was, but I have a better copy of that picture where the faces are not darkened out. I may even have the original of it, so I'll let you know.
Did you post on Facebook the names that you thought that they were?
No, I didn't. You know, I'm not good at Facebook. I never because I get so many emails. I don't have time to do. I want to tell you, but I will take the time to do that one. And one you have the men standing up with the awards in their hand, the handsome men on the end with the salt and pepper hair. That's my beautiful father. So William David.
Okay. Well, Matthew will probably be getting in touch with you because we want to get those identified.
Okay, fantastic. Right. Well, thank you all for all that you do, and I thank you for inviting me this evening, Valencia.
Thank you, and I will send you Elaine's information.
Please do. Thank you, Ms. Jones.
Thank you.
All right. Any other questions, comments?
Oh, hi.
Hi.
My name is Norman Johnson. I'm Elaine's brother. And
hi, Elaine's brother.
I spent many summers down in North Carolina. Matter of fact, my wife and I got married in Reedsville. I was a student at A&T, and we got married in Reedsville many years ago. And Elaine mentioned all these different jobs that Black men had. The one she did omit was they were funeral directors. That was one of the jobs. You could be a minister, you could be many other jobs, but one of them, a central part of the Black community was the funeral home. And I just thought I'd throw that out there. But I want to congratulate you on the work you're doing and congratulate my sister on the book she's written. When I read them, it's like I know these people, and they're fictitious people, but they seem so real to me when they jump off the page. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. And I think that's what it added to this, instead of just saying the plaintiffs, but to make them real. Hey, Val, how are you? You got your hand up?
Hey, Valencia.
Hi, that's one of my family members, her and Brenda Matthews. Oh, they always come through. Yes.
Yeah, I am Robert Jumper's oldest grandchild. Robert Jumper was one of the men with the high school diploma. I have his diploma. He graduated from Douglas High School, which is now Douglas Elementary, but it was the only Black high school in Eden. And I just wanted to say thank you to Valencia from my whole family, which I think you've talked to everybody immediately right now, including my kid, who was one of the summer interns who got to interview more family members. And I just wanted to thank you for making this public. Most people that live even in the state of North Carolina do not even know about this case. And it's crazy. Robert Jumper, youngest grandchild, my cousin, is a lawyer, and she studied the case in law school, and she got a kick out of actually, being able to firsthand. But it is a primer for all law school students, no matter where you go to law school, to learn about Griggs versus Duke Power. So I just wanted to say thank you, and that's it.
Oh, and for your daughter for getting that awesome picture in that military uniform, which every time I look at that, I'm just in awe. That, yeah. of that great picture. Michelle, your hand's up.
Yeah, my hand is up because me and Miss Elaine, and I have to call her Miss Elaine because she's my adopted. But we've debated this whole silent generation thing for a long time. And my question to her, and I guess I can ask all of you, has being silent, has it actually harmed the Black community? Because if we had known about the struggles of, our family members, especially in a case like this, that would have probably given, someone the wherewithal to actually fight, continue to fight. Instead, it seemed as though, as you all said, that we were more protected than anything else from what could possibly happen, instead of empowered by what, actually happened. And for me, that seems to be, I want to know whether or not it harmed us more than it did us. When I was listening to Miss Elaine talk about how Uncle Clarence built a house from the ground up, I'm sitting thinking, wow, we can't build a campfire now, and it's ridiculous. So that's my question to,
Michelle, see, you're trying to just get me like up all night contemplating, not getting any sleep, going like, oh my God, now I can't answer, nobody can answer that in like 30 seconds, but then you're gonna have all of us all up all night trying to figure this out. Going like, I don't know. Anybody can jump in because I already admit that I don't know. So
I'll put my hand down.
Hey, Valencia. I wonder if I can.
How are you?
So Valencia and I are educator colleagues together, and I just recently started a book club for Black educators that Valencia has just graciously joined us. And we talk about this, right, Valencia, about the fact of what has been lost to us. Mm-hmm. And as an educator, I've been in education for 15 years, not that long in the grand scheme of things. But one of the things and I'm a history teacher as well, we spend so much time teaching the history of white folks in Europe. And I would say it has harmed us, because when I think about the curriculum that we as history teachers, we are focused on teaching what the state tells us that we have to teach. It denies us our history. And then our family doesn't talk about it. And I'm also from one of the generations, like I have to make my grandma tell me stuff. And always her response is, girl, we was poor and I was working. That's usually her response. Now that she's getting older, she's kind of, and I think she sees me as an older person. Like I'm not little old Tanisha anymore. I'm an adult. She's starting to see a little bit, seeing me like that. She will start to talk to me. But I would say that it did harm us because we don't have those roots. Because when we go to school, when we send our children to school, they don't tell them anything either. So it's like, where do we get that root unless it's not in our community? And so one of the things that Valencia and I talk about with our other educators is how do we reclaim our history, our stories for our children, because they're being done a disservice. And these stories, this history, the history of our resistance, the history of our overcoming, the history of our joy, the history of all of these things is what sustains our community and projects us forward. So as much as I'm so proud, Lindsay, I'm just writing notes and getting these books ready, because these are the things that we need to start doing in our churches. Because as you know, in North Carolina and a lot of places in the South, they don't even want us to teach even this now, right? It's becoming controversial. And it is going to be for all of us as Black people to write our history down and tell the stories, so that because we know they're not going to get it in public education, because they're going to make laws. They're literally making laws in Virginia, north of us, really close to, the governor wants to ban the word equity. So these are the things that we have to start doing so we can teach our children so that they can have that solid foundation. So I'll pass it. And I'm not from Rockingham, I'm from Columbus County, a place called Whiteville, which is Southeast North Carolina. But I guarantee you we got the same stories.
Yeah, and it's even closer if you're in Rockingham County, if you're not aware of policy 3050, which has making attempts to go before our school board to shut down our history. But one of the things that I want to build on what Tanisha said was that when we start telling our stories, they don't have to be extraordinary. They can just be us. And those are powerful. And one of the things when I started researching and I'm trying to get people to talk about them, like the same thing with your grandmother said, they was like, oh no, that's not important. We didn't do anything. I was like, yes, you did. And I can't get them to talk to me. We didn't do anything. They don't think that, they don't see value in that. They don't see value that they got up every day and they made it. That's value because when they got up in every day and made it, that got me here. That got me here that I'm first generation, just like Elaine. I am first generation in my family to get a college degree. First generation in my family to get a master's degree. And I am so proud to say that this weekend, I am going to see my daughter walk across the stage to get her master's degree. I mean, just to think that. So it is value in our stories, but it's not just us telling those stories, because we can tell each other stories, but we need to document that. We need the receipts to back up our stories. So that's where the Black genealogy come in with that. Okay, we are past 8:30. So this is going to be recorded. And I can say this is not going to be the last that you hear from me and Elaine. We will be back at it again. We don't know if we know how, but we will with that. So I want to thank everybody for taking part of their Tuesday. I want to say a big shout out to, again, those family members of those plaintiffs. And again, y'all know who y'all are. Thank you for being here and always supporting and representing your family. I am just so proud to know you. A big shout out to my summer interns that came on and logged on. And this summer, they was there because they got paid for a stipend. They came here with other than just me making the request for them to be here. So that just speaks so highly of what they did and how proud, and that I really truly made great choices in taking them for them. All right. And from the MARC, again, from Matthew, our executive director, who is spending quality time with his family, well deserved. Please think about supporting the museum. Again, the only permanent exhibit of the Griggs case. This is a local museum, and that's not going to continue unless we have support. So think about getting a membership. When it does open, please come and see the exhibit. And please contact family members so that when you come to see the exhibit, we have a lot more there than what we have before. You can find me on Facebook, talking about my grandchildren, but you can find me on Facebook. I'm on Twitter. Elaine is on Facebook as well to get connected. And like I said, we will be back. Just don't know if we're in a where, but we will. Thank you. Elaine, I'm gonna say your goodbye.
Okay, thank you so much.
All right, everybody have a good night.
Okay. Yeah. I think I got it.